Have you ever wondered how to make heads or tails of your Google Analytics stats? Google Analytics is one of those places where if you're not using it, you should be using it. It's a great way a free way to track the traffic on your website, where it's coming from, how long it's been there, what pages they're going to, all that kind of stuff. A lot of people, though, they don't quite understand it because there's so much data there that they don't really understand what's important and what isn't. So I'm going to tell you what I think is important, and we'll kind of go from there. And when I think about Google Analytics, I always think about when I bought my first home, and I didn't know a whole lot about house repair, and I hired a home inspector. And this home inspector spent, a couple of hours going over my whole property in my house, and a couple of days later, he gave me this thick binder report on my house inspection. And of course, I'm not going to read this thing, and I don't know what half of these things mean. So I asked the guy if he would sit down with me and show me what was important, what I needed to know, what was going to cost me money in the future, and what's important. And he did. And so I'm going to try and do the same thing with you right now with Google Analytics, because there's so many pieces of information in there that I really only look at a few of them as vitally important. So I'll share those things with you now. First thing is keywords. What are people searching for to find you? To me, that's the most important because I'm an SEO guy. I spend a lot of time doing SEO, and I want to know which keywords I'm ranking for and how I can move up the ladder. The geolocation, the geographic location of your traffic itself. Where are they coming from? Maybe you're in a business that sells a particular product that's more popular in Australia than it might be in North America. And if you learn that, then you could start to spend more of your ad dollars, more of your focus on marketing to Australians than you would maybe in North America. So the more data that you have on where your traffic is coming from, the better. And the cool part about this geo data is that it's not just country specific. If you're a small business in a small town and you're marketing on in 3 different newspapers in 3 different towns, you can see which of those newspapers is generating the most buzz for you by looking at your map overlay in Google Analytics. Other thing that I really like to look at is my referring URLs. What websites are sending me traffic? Because keywords are great, being on Google's great, but sometimes the most traffic will come from another blog that's mentioned you, or a forum where they're talking about a post that you have up on your website, or a YouTube video that you created that's getting a lot of traffic. So knowing that allows you to kind of drill down and go and look at what your top traffic sources are, and are there better ways for me to tap that? Maybe you've got an eBay listing that's generating a lot of traffic to your website, and it's cheap enough that you could put 5 eBay listings up or something like that. So think about where your traffic's coming from, take a look at those URLs, and figure out if there's ways that you can tap those sources harder. The last thing that I really like to pay attention to is the time spent on a website. Now, it's kind of a sketchy stat because it can go 2 ways for you. So let me give you an example. Let's say I have a website that has an average time on site of 45 seconds. I know that the average person who comes to my website is going to spend 45 seconds on that website. And I make a change to the design that increases that number. The sort of common sense logic says that increasing that number is a good thing. But maybe you've created a more confusing website that just takes longer to get through. So that stat is not always something that can be looked at with, especially in an isolated sort of vacuum. You don't want to just be looking at time on site. If you're looking at time on site and conversion rate at the same time, those are things that tie together. So if you go from 45 seconds to 1 minute and 20 seconds on average on the site, and your conversions go up, that means you've made it a slightly prettier site for people to read. But if your time on site goes up and your conversions go down, you may have made your site more confusing. So time on site isn't something that you want to really base anything around. And the one thing that I want to talk about that's really important, a lot of people like to talk about bounce rate, and a lot of people build their business around bounce rate, and that's actually the worst stat for you to look at. Here's why. One of my best selling websites has the highest bounce rate of all of my websites on Google Analytics. It's in the 80s to 90% bounce rate. Sometimes it's at like a 96% bounce rate. Because the only people who don't bounce are the people who are buying. So if I'm converting, let's say a 6% on a website, that's a good conversion rate. And that means 94 or maybe 92% of the people who come to my website are bouncing, they're leaving because they're not buying. So that doesn't mean that I've got a bad website. That just means my bounce rate's high because I'm selling something, and that's your only option. Buy or leave. So bounce rate isn't something that you want to really spend too much time focusing on. Again, this kind of works in conjunction with other stats. You can definitely look at bounce rate, but don't make it all about your bounce rate. Those are my tips on Google Analytics. Those are the only things I personally look at.